Hey guys, welcome back to Introduction to Node.js, ExpressJS, and MongoDB. My name is Kaustubh Gharge, but you can call me KG. Before we begin, let's look at the session outline. So in this session, we're going to be covering ExpressJS, the features and the fundamental concepts of ExpressJS, as well as installation of ExpressJS. ExpressJS is a framework that is built on Node.js, which will be used to create HTTP application servers. Let's do a quick recap of what we learned in the previous two sessions. In the first session, we covered the advanced fundamental concepts of JavaScript, including the promises, callbacks, and async and await. In the second session, we learned what Node.js is, how to install Node.js, how to use npm, which is the Node package manager, which we'll be using to install ExpressJS as a application dependency. And in this session, we're going to be building on top of that foundational layer that we learned in Node, and we will be building a application using Express framework. So what is ExpressJS? Express is a minimal and flexible Node.js web application framework that provides a robust set of features for web and mobile applications. So in simplest terms, ExpressJS is a set of tools that we use to build HTTP servers. Node.js does this out of the box, or rather Node.js does not do this out of the box, because Node is just an environment, it's just a foundation. But what Express gives us is the access to both incoming and outgoing web traffic, and also allows us to build the request and response for this web traffic. Okay, it is a unopinionated framework. What it means is it does not force you to use any templating engine for the front end, as well as it does not enforce any object-related mapping database for the backend. Okay, so it does not force you to use any specific database. You can use MySQL or Mongoose or MongoDB, depending on your preference, which in fact we will be covering in Project 2 and Project 3. And it also allows you to use any sort of front-end technology with it. So for example, you can use Angular or REST or React.js as front-end. Why is this important? Is because it gives you the freedom and it gives you a modular way of templating. Okay. The most important concept where ExpressJS will be used is to create the backend applications. So consider a use case of creating a e-commerce application like Amazon, where you as a user search for products on their website, and when you send that request for the particular product that you want in a particular size and particular color, that request is handled by a backend application. So consider this application is to be built on Node.js, where the framework that we can use to build this application can be ExpressJS, which will take this request from the client, that is the client's browser, and look up for the relevant information in the database which is associated with. Okay, so let's consider the case for database as MongoDB. It will look at the product with the specific size and the color, and it will fetch it and display it to the user. So ExpressJS, or the application that we built on ExpressJS in this case, acts as a middleman for the front end as well as the database. So let's look at some of the features of ExpressJS. So ExpressJS allows us to create single page, multi-page, and hybrid mobile and web applications. So when you think of the previous example that I gave you about e-commerce, that was just for the web application, it can be used to create mobile applications as well. So consider an example like Uber or Lyft or Uber Eats, in which you order a cab using the phone, but the request is again sent to the backend, and the backend actually orchestrates all of the relevant pieces of information and sends the response back to your mobile applications. That backend application can be built using Node.js and more specifically using ExpressJS. Like it said over here, it is common for building backend functions for web applications. It is also useful in building APIs, which are application programming interfaces, which we will cover in a few minutes. So let's look at the installation of ExpressJS. I'm going to move to Google Chrome browser and type in expressjs.com, where I will see the home page for ExpressJS. If you scroll down, you will see the definition for ExpressJS, and it will tell you that ExpressJS provides HTTP utility methods and middlewares to create APIs. They also tell you that Express layer provides a thin fundamental web application features. That's why allowing the application that you build to be of higher performance. They also tell you that it is one of the foundational frameworks for the other frameworks which are in the Node ecosystem. But what we are concerned right now is with the installation. So if you can see here, the portion that I'm highlighting, we're going to be needing this command only for installation of ExpressJS. You're free to look at the other links over here, but at the moment I'm going to be just concerned about installation of ExpressJS. So ExpressJS will be installed as a dependency in our Node application. Okay, so let me switch back to the Visual Studio Code Editor. Here I have created a folder, and inside which I have opened up a terminal. In here I'm going to initialize a new Node application, so I'll just say npm init, and I'm going to provide it with a flag of -- save to select all the default values. So it is going to create a package.json file which does not have dependencies just yet, but I will be installing ExpressJS as one of the application dependencies. So let me move back to expressjs.com and just copy this code over here and paste it in my terminal. Alright, so if you notice here in the package.json, it created a dependencies object which has Express and the latest version of the Express, in which in this case it is 4.17.1. And if you expand this node modules, you will find Express as one of the dependencies. Alright, so let's quickly create a new file, not inside the node modules, my mistake. And in here, let's create a simple application server. So we have already installed Express as one of the dependencies. Let me close this and make some space here. In here, I'm going to initialize Express. So I will say constant Express equals, and I'm going to require the Express module that I had just installed. So I'll type in require. And in here I'll type Express. Alright, so now that we have included Express in our application, I'm going to create a object, the instance of this application. So I'll say const app equals Express. Alright, I'm going to create a server. So a server will need a port, so I'm going to create a variable called port with value of 3000. And now what I'm going to type here, you may just ignore this for the moment. We're going to be covering that in a few minutes, but let me quickly type here. So I'll say request and response. So if you notice this is a callback function. and I'm going to type in hello world. Again, I'm going to add in a callback function. Let me log out the port real quick. Alright, instead of using double quotes, I'm going to be using these backticks. Alright, save this, and let me run this application real quick. Let's see if everything is in order. Alright, looks fine. So I'm just going to say node index.js, and it starts the server at port 3000. So we did not get any error. It logged out that the server is running on port 3000. So we have created our first application. Alright, so I made a mistake here. It's supposed to be rest.send. Alright, okay, so we're going to be getting back in a moment here to understand what this particular code means, or even what this code means. But at this moment, we have created a simple application server using ExpressJS. Alright, let's go back and look at the fundamentals of Node.js and then come back to the code real quick. So ExpressJS is used to create application programming interfaces. So you must have created APIs before in some other technology like PHP or .NET or Java. Same way we can use JavaScript to create APIs, and Node.js enables using JavaScript on the backend, on which we use ExpressJS as a framework to make our lives easier, as the developers' lives easier to create application programming interfaces. So API is a set of programming instructions and standards for accessing the web-based software application or web tool. Okay. In particular, we're going to be building RESTful APIs. REST is representational state transfer. It is a software architectural style that defines a set of constraints that are used to create web services. So we are going to be using REST API architecture, and we are going to be using HTTP methods to implement this architecture. So HTTP method is commonly used as verbs. So if I move back to the code now and explain this to you real quick. So in here I have initialized the application for Express, and I have used a verb called get. Okay, so this triggers the get HTTP method for the API that I'm defining here. So what get means is that I need to request something from the backend, and the backend is supposed to provide me. So in here I will be getting a request, and I'm going to be sending a response. Okay, so this particular aspect is called middleware, which you will understand in just a moment. But you need to pay attention to this get keyword. So get is one of the HTTP methods, and there are a few other methods such as post, put, delete, and update. We're going to be dealing a lot with get, post, and delete, even update, which collectively together are called CRUD applications, which is create, read, and update and delete. Okay, getting back to this code. After we have selected app.get, within this method we have defined a endpoint. So this particular / is called an endpoint, which is supposed to be root here because it will be localhost 3000 and root. Okay, and if I were to be selecting any different endpoint here, so if I were to talk v1, that is for version 1, this would be the particular endpoint, localhost port 3000 and /v1 / and we pass in the callback function with request and response. In response here, I'm just sending in, let me remove this, I'm just sending in hello world because we are not doing anything important right now. We will expand on this code in just a moment, but I'm just going to be sending a response of hello world. So whenever I call in this endpoint, it will send a response of hello world. So let me quickly open up Postman and show this to you real quick. We will be covering Postman in project 2, so you don't have to worry about Postman just yet. I'm just going to show you the response that this application sends. So I'm going to be using the same port that is running on, that is 3000. So if you notice, the URL here is http://localhost:3000, and the request I'm going to be sending is get. So I'm just going to send, and it gives me an error because I think I'm sending in a body as well. We don't need to send in a body. Alright, it says send is not defined. Okay, let me go back to the code. Alright, so I debugged here and I was supposed to send none in the body parameter, so that's why I was getting an error, but all good now. I'm getting hello world as response. Okay, so that is perfect. Let me go back to the code again. So what is happening here is the application is listening on port. So this is starting the server, a server instance on port 3000. And on port 3000, if I press in, or if I send in the data at the root endpoint, it is, or I'm calling on root endpoint, it is responding with whatever I send in response. So let's say if this was v1 for version 1, if I save this, close this and run this again, or let me add this, let me make some changes here as well. So let me say hello world from version 1. Save this, close this, and if I send this, I'm going to get a 404 error because this endpoint now does not exist. Okay, so as I'm getting an error, and the error code is 404. But if I send here as v1, I'm going to get a response of hello world from version 1. Okay, so this is an example of working server. Perfect. And the HTTP method in this case we used was the get method. We'll be covering the other methods as we move ahead. Alright, scaffolding. Scaffolding is a easier way of creating a skeleton for the web application. Okay, so the best way of using a scaffold, and I don't recommend using scaffolding in the beginning of your career in ExpressJS, but as soon as you get comfortable with ExpressJS and if you start working on multiple projects, that's when I would recommend using scaffolding tools. And one of the most popular scaffolding tools is actually provided on ExpressJS's own website. It's called Express Generator. So if you go to expressjs.com and you select getting started and select Express Generator, it gives you an application, it gives you a tool that actually creates a application skeleton. Okay, so I'm going to be using this right here, and I'm going to be installing Express Generator globally. So let me close this, expand on this, make some space, paste this. So now if you notice here, it is going to create this tool globally. Okay, so if I press enter, it is going to create globally, and it gave me an error saying that permission denied. Okay, yeah, so I think I have some issues with installing packages globally for some time now. This is something wrong with my Mac. There's nothing wrong with the Express generator. But what this is going to do is this is going to create the generated toolset, and in which we can quickly create an application. So let me try this, npx instead of npm. Alright, so it's saying, alright, perfect. Alright, so it created a Express file real quick, and if you notice here now, it has created a scaffold for my first application. Okay, so it created a few it included a few dependencies that it thinks are most commonly used. If I look at package.json, it installed a whole lot of dependencies, including Express, HTTP errors, Jade, Morgan, debug, and cookie parser. We're going to be looking at some of these, but not all of them. Since this course is mostly focused on Express and MongoDB, we are not going to be looking at all of these. But this is one of the easiest way of scaffolding an application and reusing it again and again. Alright, so let's move back. So we did the scaffolding just a moment ago, and in here we have the scaffold ready for application. All we have to do is go in here and add our application logic. We can just define routes as well. It created some default routes. We're going to be looking at routes as we move ahead. Alright, let's look at middleware.